There is a specific kind of comfort that comes with living in a gated community. For many, it represents the ultimate culmination of hard work, a physical barrier between your loved ones and the unpredictable dangers of the outside world. You pay for security guards, high walls, and the quiet assurance that when you lock your doors at night, your family is safe. But walls and checkpoints are only illusions of safety, because sometimes the threat doesn't come from the outside world. Sometimes the monsters are already inside the gates. Today, we find ourselves looking back at a case from the Philippines. It is a story that paralyzed the nation in the summer of 1991. It is a case of staggering brutality, catastrophic police incompetence, and a decades-long pursuit of a justice that, ultimately, may never be served. This is the story of the Vizconde Massacre. In 1991, Lauro Vizconde was a man doing what thousands of Filipinos do every single year, sacrificing his own comfort for the sake of his family's future. He was miles away, working long, grueling hours as a cook in the United States. His sole motivation was to provide a comfortable life for his wife and daughters in their home located in Vincent Street in BF Homes, Parañaque, an affluent, sprawling, and heavily guarded subdivision in Metro Manila. Back in the Philippines, his 49-year-old wife Estrelita was the anchor of the household. She was known to her friends and neighbors as a deeply devoted mother, a woman whose entire world revolved around her children. Her eldest daughter, Carmela, was 19 years old. She was a striking, bright college student with a vibrant social life and an incredibly promising future ahead of her. And then there was the youngest, Jennifer. She was just a little girl, only 7 years of age. By all accounts, the Vizcondes were a quiet, respectable family. The weekend of June 29, 1991 should have been entirely unremarkable. It was a Saturday night. Estrelita and her daughters were safe inside their upscale home. But as the night deepened, something deeply sinister found its way inside. The following morning, Sunday, June 30th, the family's domestic helper arrived at the residence. When she approached the house, everything seemed uncomfortably still. There was no movement, no sound of the television, and no voices. When she finally managed to get inside, the silence was shattered by a scene of unimaginable horror. The authorities were called, and as police walked through the seemingly normal suburban home, they were met with a bloodbath that defied all logic. Estrelita Vizconde was found lifeless, having suffered 13 stab wounds. Given the defensive nature of some of the injuries, investigators believe she had fought desperately, likely trying to protect her children from whoever had invaded their sanctuary. In her bedroom, they found 19-year-old Carmela. She had been stabbed 17 times, but adding a profoundly disturbing layer to an already horrific crime, Carmela was found half naked. It became immediately apparent that she had been subjected to a brutal sexual assault before her life was taken. And then there was little Jennifer. In what can only be described as an act of absolute cowardly depravity, the 7-year-old child had been stabbed 19 times. The sheer physical exertion required to inflict nearly 50 stab wounds across 3 victims suggested one of 2 deeply unsettling possibilities. Either the killer was completely unhinged and operating in a state of frenzied rage, or there were multiple attackers in the house that night. When Lauro Vizconde received a devastating phone call in the United States, his reality collapsed. He boarded a flight back to Manila a shattered man. His wife, his bright teenage daughter, and his little girl had been eradicated in a single night. But the nightmare for Lauro was only just the beginning, because the police investigation that followed was, frankly, a masterclass in incompetence. In the desperate rush to secure the scene, protocols were completely ignored. Neighbors, media, and unauthorized personnel were allowed to trample through the house, destroying vital footprints and trace evidence. In one of the most baffling and frustrating blunders in Philippine law enforcement history, police even allowed the bloody mattress where the victims were found to be taken outside and burned, a seemingly coincidental case of pure incompetence. Crucial physical evidence was literally reduced to ash. Desperate to appease a terrified and outraged public, the police began pointing fingers in every direction. They initially arrested a group of men known as the Akyat Bahay Gang, local burglars, but the evidence was painfully flimsy, and the charges were dropped. Next, they rounded up a group of local construction workers. They were paraded in front of the media, but it soon came to light that their confessions had allegedly been extracted through police torture. They, too, were eventually cleared. For 4 agonizing years, the Vizconde case went cold. Lauro lived alone in the shadow of his unimaginable grief, trapped in a justice system that seemed entirely incapable of finding the men who slaughtered his family. But in 1995, a woman named Jessica Alfaro stepped out of the shadows, and the case was blown wide open. Alfaro claimed to be an eyewitness. She approached the National Bureau of Investigation and spun a dark, detailed narrative. She stated that this wasn't a robbery gone wrong. She claimed she had been in the Vizconde home that night, and that the murders were committed by a group of young men from some of the most affluent, politically powerful families in the country, men who were allegedly under the influence of drugs. The media dubbed them the Alabang Boys. At the center of her accusation was Hubert Webb, the son of former Philippine Senator Freddie Webb. The trial that followed was a media circus. Alfaro's testimony was graphic. She detailed how the young men took turns assaulting Carmela, while Estrelita and Jennifer were silenced for being witnesses, followed by testimonies of Webb's own maids stating that they washed the blood-soaked clothes of Webb himself after arriving home. The defense team fought back viciously. They argued that Alfaro was a coached witness, a known drug user whose story was riddled with inconsistencies. More importantly, Hubert Webb's defense presented a massive contradiction. They produced travel records, passport stamps, and testimonies from the FBI confirming that Hubert Webb had been in the United States from March 1991 until late 1992. He was out of the country when the murders occurred. Despite the seemingly ironclad alibi, the trial court chose to believe Jessica Alfaro. In January 2000, Judge Amelita Tolentino sentenced Hubert Webb, Antonio Lejano II, and several others to life imprisonment. For Lauro Vizconde, who had spent his health and his life savings fighting in the courts, it felt like a hollow yet necessary victory. The men he believed were responsible were finally locked away. But as we know, the truth in true crime is rarely permanent. For 10 years, the convicted men sat in a maximum security prison, relentlessly appealing their case. They maintained their innocence, pointing to the ignored U.S. travel documents and the sheer lack of physical evidence linking them to the crime scene. A request was even made to test the semen found on Carmela using modern DNA technology, only for the Supreme Court to discover that the NBI had somehow lost the samples while in their custody. Then, on December 14, 2010, the Supreme Court of the Philippines delivered a ruling that shocked the nation. In a majority decision, they reversed the lower court's conviction. They ruled that Jessica Alfaro's testimony was fundamentally flawed and entirely unreliable. They stated that the prosecution had completely failed to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt and ordered the immediate release of Hubert Webb and his co-accused. The Supreme Court reminded the nation of a sobering legal principle. It is far better to let a guilty man go free than to strip an innocent man of his life based on fabricated evidence. When the verdict was read, Laura Vizconde broke down. Nearly 20 years of fighting, only to be placed right back at square one. The aftermath of the Vizconde Massacre leaves a bitter metallic taste. The public remains divided to this day. Some believe that wealthy families simply bought their son's way out of prison. Others are firmly convinced that the Webb group were merely convenient scapegoats for a botched police investigation, and that the true killers, the monsters who butchered a mother, a teenager, and a 7-year-old child, have been walking the streets as free men since 1991. Lauro Vizconde never got his answer. He spent his remaining years dedicating his life to helping other victims of violent crime. He passed away in 2016 from cardiac arrest. He died a lonely man, having lived for 25 years with a broken heart, never knowing for certain who destroyed his world. The house in BF Homes was eventually demolished, leaving behind nothing but an empty lot and lingering, suffocating dread. A reminder that sometimes the darkness gets in and justice never follows.